The barracks at Fort Bragg smelled like sweat, cheap soap, and desperation. It was 2:47 a.m. when Lena Gray finally stumbled through the door, her combat boots dragging mud across the concrete floor. Outside, North Carolina's October rain hammered against the metal roof with a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in her skull. She barely made it back from the night navigation exercise. While the other recruits had finished 2 hours ago, Lena had gotten turned around in the pine forest, her compass readings confused by her exhaustion. The drill sergeant had found her eventually, sitting against a tree, silent tears mixing with rainwater on her face. "Gray's back," someone muttered from one of the bunks. Thought maybe she'd finally quit. Lena didn't respond. She was 23 years old, 5'6", with dark hair now plastered her skull and eyes that had lost their fire somewhere around week 4 of basic training. Before the Army, she'd been a barista in Seattle, living in a studio apartment that cost more than she made, serving overpriced lattes to tech workers who never learned her name. She'd enlisted because she needed purpose, direction, something to prove. She was more than a girl who'd aged out of foster care at 18 with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a high school diploma from a school that had already forgotten her. "Hey, failure," called out Private Rodriguez from his bunk near the door. He was built like a linebacker, all shoulders and attitude, the kind of guy who'd been team captain in high school and couldn't let go of that identity. "You gonna make it through the week, or should we start a betting pool on when you wash out?" Scattered laughter rippled through the dark barracks. Not everyone joined in. Private Chin kept his eyes closed, and Specialist Morrison just turned toward the wall. But enough did to make Lena's chest tighten. She dropped her rucksack on the floor beside her bunk, the sound echoing in the space. Her hands were shaking as she tried to unlace her boots, fingers fumbling with knots swollen from the rain. "I'm serious," Rodriguez continued, emboldened by the attention. "You're holding everyone back. Every time you fall behind, we all pay for it. You know how many extra push-ups I did today because you couldn't keep up on the run." "Leave her alone, Rodriguez," said Private First Class Williams from across the room. She was older than most of them, 29, with 2 kids back home in Georgia. "We all have bad days." "Bad days?" Rodriguez sat up in his bunk. "Gray's had nothing but bad days since we got here. She can't shoot, she can't run, she can't navigate. What the hell is she even doing here?" Lena finally got her boots off and stood to face him, swaying slightly. The fluorescent emergency lights cast her shadow long across the floor. Her uniform was still soaked, and she was shivering now, but something in Rodriguez's tone had struck a nerve she'd been trying to protect. "I'm here because I enlisted, same as you," she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse from the cold and exhaustion. "I have every right to be here." "Rights," Rodriguez laughed. "This isn't about rights. This is about whether you can do the job. And let me tell you something, Gray, you can't. That's enough." The voice came from the doorway, sharp and commanding. Everyone turned to see Drill Sergeant Patterson standing in the entrance, rain still dripping from his patrol cap. He was a lean man in his late 30s, with a face that looked carved from granite and eyes that missed nothing. He'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had the quiet intensity of someone who'd seen things he chose not to talk about. "Lights out was an hour ago," Patterson said, his gaze sweeping the room. "That means mouth shut and eyes closed. Anyone got a problem with that?" "No, Drill Sergeant," came the mumbled chorus. "Good. Gray, get changed and get in your rack. Everyone else, I suggest you remember that every single person in this room is here because they chose to serve. That means something, even if you've forgotten it." Patterson left, and the barracks fell into an uncomfortable silence. Lena quickly changed into dry PT clothes, Army-issue gray T-shirt and black shorts, and climbed into her bunk. The thin mattress offered little comfort, but she was beyond caring. She lay there staring at the metal frame of the bunk above her, listening to the rain and the sound of other soldiers settling into sleep. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. Her feet were covered in blisters, her shoulders raw from where the rucksack straps had dug in during endless marches, her hands calloused and cut from obstacle courses and weapons handling. But the physical pain wasn't what kept her awake. It was the knowledge that Rodriguez was right. She was failing. Every test, every exercise, every evaluation. She was always in the bottom quarter of the platoon. The other recruits had started avoiding her during team exercises, and she couldn't blame them. Being partnered with Lena Gray meant being held back, means extra punishment meant failure. Lena closed her eyes and tried to remember why she thought the Army would be different, why she believed that here, in this institution built on discipline and merit, she might finally find a place where she belonged. Her caseworker at the foster agency had talked about the military like it was a golden ticket. Structure, education, benefits, a chance to build a real life. Instead, she found the same thing she found everywhere else. Proof that she wasn't good enough. The rain intensified, turning into a thunderstorm that shook the barracks windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across Fort Bragg's sprawling grounds. Lena pulled her thin blanket up to her chin and wished she could disappear into it. That's when a memory hit her, unbidden, unwanted, impossible to ignore. She was 7 years old, sitting in the back of a social worker's car, watching the only home she'd ever known disappear in the rear-view mirror. Her mother had been arrested that morning, led away in handcuffs, while Lena watched from the school playground. Possession with intent to distribute. The third strike. "Don't worry, sweetheart," the social worker had said, glancing at her in the rear-view mirror. "We'll find you a nice family." They never did. 12 foster homes in 11 years. Some were fine, people doing their best with a broken system. Others were nightmares she still had trouble sleeping through. By the time she aged out at 18, Lena had learned one fundamental truth. She was on her own, and she always would be. The Army was supposed to change that. It was supposed to give her a family, a purpose, a reason to believe she mattered. Instead, it was just proving what she'd always suspected. Maybe she was meant to be alone. Maybe there was something fundamentally broken in her that no amount of training or discipline could fix. Lena felt tears sliding down her face and hated herself for it. Crying was weakness. Crying was giving up. But the tears came anyway, silent and bitter, while around her the barracks settled into the deep breathing of sleep and the storm raged on outside. She didn't remember falling asleep, but she must have, because suddenly Drill Sergeant Patterson was banging on a metal trash can lid and screaming, "Rise and shine, warriors! PT formation in 15 minutes. Move, move, move." Lena jolted awake, her heart hammering. Around her, soldiers scrambled out of bunks, feet hitting the floor, lockers slamming open. The gray light of pre-dawn filtered through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a cool, damp morning that smelled like wet earth and pine needles. She dressed quickly in her PT uniform, pulled her hair back into the regulation bun, and joined the mass exodus toward the formation area. Her body protested every movement, muscles screaming from yesterday's exertions. She could barely lift her arms to tie her shoes. Outside, the platoon assembled in neat rows on the concrete pad between barracks. 42 soldiers, all in identical gray and black, all standing at attention as Drill Sergeant Patterson walked the formation with his hands clasped behind his back. "Good morning, warriors," he called out. "Good morning, Drill Sergeant," they shouted back. "Today we're doing something special. 5-mile run, followed by the combat fitness test. I want to see who's ready for next week's final evaluation and who needs to seriously reconsider their life choices." Lena's stomach dropped. The combat fitness test included a 3-rep max deadlift, standing power throw, hand-release push-ups, sprint drag carry leg tucks, and a 2-mile run. She'd failed it twice already. They started with a run, heading out onto the dirt roads that wound through Fort Bragg's training areas. The morning air was cool and fresh after the storm, and under different circumstances, Lena might have enjoyed the scenery. Endless pine forests, rolling hills, the occasional deer bounding across the path. But she was too busy trying not to fall behind. Her lungs burned within the first mile. By mile 3, she was running alone, the rest of the platoon having pulled ahead. Drill Sergeant Patterson ran beside her, not speaking, just matching her pace, which somehow made it worse. "I can't," she gasped at mile 4. "I can't do it." "Don't tell me what you can't do," Patterson said, his breathing barely elevated despite the pace. Tell me what you're going to do. I'm going to finish. Lena forced out, even though every fiber of her being was screaming to stop. Damn right you are. They finished the 5 miles in 43 minutes, well below the required time. The rest of the platoon was already assembled at the fitness test site, a large outdoor area with various equipment stations. Lena could see Rodriguez smirking as she stumbled up, her face red and sweat-soaked. The combat fitness test was a disaster. Lena's deadlift max was barely above the minimum. Her power throw fell short. She struggled through the push-ups, her arms shaking with effort. The sprint drag carry left her gasping on the ground. She couldn't complete a single leg tuck, her core strength completely depleted. By the time they finished, Lena was sitting on the ground with her head between her knees, trying not to throw up. Around her, other soldiers were laughing and congratulating each other on their performances. She was invisible again, just like always. Gray, Drill Sergeant Patterson's boots appeared in her field of vision. My office. 15 minutes. Get cleaned up first. Her heart sank. This was it. The conversation where they told her she wasn't cut out for this. The discharge papers. The bus ride back to Seattle, and a life that had nothing waiting for her. Lena dragged herself back to the barracks, took the fastest shower of her life, and changed into a clean uniform. Her hands shook as she tied her boots. In the mirror, she looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, defeated. The walk to Patterson's office felt like walking to her own execution. The building was a simple concrete structure near the company headquarters, with a small waiting area and a door marked Drill Sergeant Patterson. She knocked twice. Enter. Patterson sat behind a metal desk covered in paperwork, evaluations, and training schedules. The walls were decorated with military memorabilia, unit patches, photographs from deployments, certificates of achievement. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, Gray. She sat, keeping her back straight and her hands folded in her lap, trying to maintain some dignity in what she was sure would be her final military moment. Patterson studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. You're failing, Private. Every metric, every standard. You're not meeting them. You know that, right? Yes, Drill Sergeant. Her voice was barely a whisper. So, what are you going to do about it? Lena looked up confused. Sir, I asked what you're going to do about it. You've got 1 week until final evaluations. 1 week to prove you belong here. So I'm asking you, Private Gray, what's your plan? She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected to be given a choice. I don't know, Drill Sergeant. I've been trying my hardest. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not. Stop. Patterson held up a hand. I don't want to hear what you're not. Every soldier in my platoon has weaknesses. What matters is how they address them. So let me ask you a different question. Why did you enlist? The question caught her off guard. I needed purpose, direction. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. And have you given up on that? No, Drill Sergeant. Then prove it. I'm offering you extra training sessions. Every evening after regular training, we work on your weak points. It's going to be hell. It's going to hurt. You're going to want to quit. But if you stick with it, you might be ready for next week's evaluations. Your call. Lena felt something stir in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. A lifeline she hadn't expected to be thrown. I'll do it, Drill Sergeant. Whatever it takes. Good. We start tonight. 1900 hours at the fitness center. Don't be late. Dismissed. Lena stood, saluted, and left the office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. It wasn't much, just a chance, just one more shot, but it was more than she'd had that morning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and drills. That evening, Lena showed up at the fitness center at exactly 1900 hours to find Drill Sergeant Patterson waiting with what looked like a sadistic smile. Ready to work, Private? Yes, Drill Sergeant. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense physical training Lena had ever experienced. Patterson broke down every element of the combat fitness test, identifying her specific weaknesses and designing exercises to address them. core strength, upper body endurance, explosive power, cardiovascular capacity. By the time he dismissed her at 2,100 hours, Lena could barely walk. But as she limped back to the barracks under the North Carolina stars, she felt something she hadn't felt since arriving at Fort Bragg. Determination. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she wasn't as broken as she thought. And maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found someone who believed in her enough to push her past her limits. The barracks were quiet when she returned. Most soldiers were already in their bunks. Some reading, some writing letters home, some just staring at their phones during the precious 30 minutes of personal time they got each evening. Lena collapsed onto her bunk, every muscle screaming. Extra training? Williams asked from across the aisle. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. Patterson doesn't waste his time on quitters, Williams said quietly. He sees something in you, Gray. Don't let him down. As Lena drifted off to sleep that night, exhausted but oddly hopeful, she didn't know that everything was about to change. She didn't know that buried somewhere in her past was a secret that the Army had spent years trying to erase. She didn't know that within 72 hours, she would speak 2 words that would transform her from the platoon's weakest link into its most dangerous mystery. All she knew was that tomorrow she would get up and try again, and the day after that, and the day after that, until she either succeeded or her body gave out completely. Outside, the North Carolina night settled over Fort Bragg like a blanket, hiding secrets that were older than Lena's enlistment and deeper than anyone suspected. The base hummed with its usual nighttime activity, guard changes, late training exercises, the distant sound of helicopters returning from missions. And in an office 3 buildings away from where Lena slept, a computer flagged something unusual in the personnel database. A routine background check had triggered an alert, a name match, a connection to a program that officially didn't exist. The alert was automatically forwarded to a classified server, where it would sit unread until morning. By then, it would be too late to stop what was already in motion. 3 days of Patterson's brutal evening training sessions had left Lena feeling like she'd been run over by a tank. Her body was a canvas of bruises and strained muscles, but something was changing, not in her physical capabilities. Those were improving, but slowly. But in her mindset, she was starting to believe she might actually survive this. It was Wednesday evening when everything went wrong. The platoon had been running night operations, a simulated patrol through the pine forests of Fort Bragg, complete with role players acting as hostile forces. The scenario was designed to be stressful, confusing, and realistic. What wasn't designed to be was actually dangerous. But at 2,247 hours, it became exactly that. Lena was positioned with 3 other soldiers, Rodriguez, Chun, and a quiet kid from Iowa named Jensen, when they heard the first explosion. Not a training explosion. A real one. The ground shook, and a fireball erupted from the direction of the ammunition storage facility about half a mile south. What the hell? Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. That wasn't part of the scenario. Before anyone could respond, automatic weapons fire erupted, sharp, distinct, and definitely not blanks. Chin dropped to the ground immediately, training taking over. That's live fire. Get down. Lena's mind went blank with terror. This wasn't supposed to happen. Training exercises used simulation rounds. This was real ammunition, real explosions, real danger. She pressed herself against the trunk of a pine tree, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. All stations, this is Overlord, came Drill Sergeant Patterson's voice over the radio. Strained and urgent. We have a genuine emergency situation. Suspected armed intrusion at the storage facility. All training units fall back to Rally Point Charlie immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. More explosions. The night lit up with fire. In the orange glow, Lena could see smoke rising into the October sky, thick and black. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of burning chemicals and something else, cordite, gunpowder, the acrid scent of modern warfare. We need to move. She was already up and moving, keeping low. Rally Point Charlie is 2 clicks northeast. Rodriguez, take point. Jensen, your rear guard. Gray, stay in the middle. They moved through the forest as quickly as they dared, stumbling over roots and undergrowth in the darkness. The explosions continued behind them, a steady rhythm of destruction. Lena's mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. Armed intrusion at Fort Bragg? That was supposed to be impossible. The base had multiple layers of security, armed guards, surveillance systems. They were halfway to the rally point when Rodriguez suddenly held up his fist. The signal to stop. Everyone froze. Through the trees ahead, Lena could see lights, flashlights, moving in a search pattern. But they weren't the steady, organized movements of military personnel. They were erratic, aggressive. "That's not ours," Rodriguez whispered into the radio. "Overlord, we have possible hostiles between our position and Rally Point Charlie." Static. Then Patterson's voice stressed, "Fall back to alternate position. Rally Point Delta. South by." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Chin tried to raise him again. Got nothing. "Communications are jammed. Someone's blocking our frequencies." "What do we do?" Jensen's voice was shaking. He was 18, fresh out of high school in Cedar Rapids, and this was way beyond anything he'd trained for. Lena's mind was spinning. The explosions were getting closer, which meant whatever was happening was spreading. The communications were jammed. Unknown hostiles were between them and their unit, and they were 4 basic training soldiers with simulation weapons and minimal tactical experience. That's when the memories surfaced, sharp and clear and completely inexplicable. She was younger, maybe 9 or 10, sitting in a room she didn't remember. A man in civilian clothes, no uniform, no identification, was speaking to her in a calm, measured voice. If you're ever in danger, Lena, truly in danger, you need to remember these words. Nightfall Protocol. Can you repeat that for me? Nightfall Protocol. Her younger self had said obediently, "Good girl. Those words will help you. They'll make people listen. But you can only use them once, and only when there's no other option. Do you understand?" The memory faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Lena disoriented and confused. It couldn't be real. It had to be stress, trauma, her mind inventing false memories to cope with the terror of their situation. She'd never been in a room like that, had never spoken to a man like that. Had she? "Gray," Chun hissed. "We're moving. Stay close." They started moving again, this time heading east instead of northeast, trying to circle around the unknown contacts. The forest was dark and treacherous, every shadow potentially hostile. Lena's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip her simulation rifle just to keep them steady. They'd gone maybe 200 yards when the flashlights found them, 3 beams cutting through the darkness, pinning them in place like insects on a board. Then a voice, American accent but wrong somehow. Too calm, too control for chaos around them. "Don't move. Drop the weapons." Rodriguez, trying to be brave or stupid or both. "We're U.S. Army personnel. This is a military installation. You need to." "I said drop the weapons." The sound of actual rifles being charged, that distinctive metallic click that every soldier learned to recognize. These weren't simulation weapons. These weren't training rounds. If they didn't comply, they would die. Chin dropped his rifle first. The others followed, including Lena. They were surrounded now. 6 or 7 figures emerging from the darkness, all wearing tactical gear, but no identifying patches. No unit insignia. No flags. Nothing to indicate who they were, or why they were attacking a U.S. military base. "On your knees, hands behind your heads." They complied. Lena's mind was racing through her training, trying to remember the protocol for prisoner situations. Name, rank, serial number. Don't resist. Wait for rescue. But there was something wrong with the scenario, something that didn't fit the standard training narratives. These weren't enemy combatants in some foreign country. This was North Carolina. This was home. One of the figures approached Chun, who'd been carrying the radio, ripped it off his gear, threw it on the ground, and crushed it with his boot. "Where's the rest of your unit?" "Name, rank." Chun started. The figure hit him across the face with the butt of his rifle. Chun went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. Jensen made a sound like a whimper. Rodriguez was perfectly still, his face pale in the flashlight beams. I'll ask one more time. Where's your unit? Nobody answered. Lena could hear her own breathing, fast and shallow, could feel sweat running down her back despite the cool October night. Her mind kept returning to that impossible memory, those two words. Nightfall Protocol. It made no sense. It couldn't be real. But what if it was? What if, buried somewhere in her forgotten childhood, there was something the Army needed to know? What if those words actually meant something? The figure moved toward Rodriguez next, raising his weapon. Last chance. Wait! Lena's voice came out louder than she intended, cracking with fear, but clear enough. Wait, please don't. The figure turned toward her, through the tactical gear and the darkness. She couldn't see his face, but she could feel his attention like a physical weight. You have something to say? This was insane. This was the stress talking. This was her traumatized mind inventing solutions that didn't exist. But they were going to die anyway, all four of them, if someone didn't do something. And what if those words meant something? Nightfall Protocol, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. The effect was immediate and electric. Every single one of the armed figures froze. The one closest to her took a step back, his weapon lowering slightly. Through the darkness, she heard one of them say something into a radio, words she couldn't quite catch. Say that again, the figure in front of her demanded. His voice completely changed now. Not threatening. Almost fearful? Nightfall Protocol, Lena repeated, louder this time. I don't know what it means, but I was told to say it if I was ever in danger. I was told it would make people listen. The radio on the figure's chest crackled. A voice came through, different from before, older, more authoritative. Extract them all, immediately, secure transport, and give me command on encrypted line. Now! The armed figures moved with sudden purpose, no longer hostile but urgent. They were pulling Lena and the others to their feet, not roughly but quickly. Move. All of you. We need to get you out of the area. What the hell is going on? Rodriguez demanded, finding his voice again. Shut up and move, soldier. Questions later. Survival now. They were half-dragged, half-marched through the forest at a pace that had them all gasping within minutes. Behind them, the explosions had stopped, but the orange glow of fires painted the trees in flickering shadows. Lena's mind was reeling. What had she just done? What were those words? Why had they worked? They emerged onto a service road where two black SUVs waited, engines running, no license plates visible. The armed figure split them up, Lena in one vehicle, the other three in the second. Before she could protest, the doors slammed shut, and they were moving, tires squealing on the wet pavement. The interior of the SUV smelled like leather and gun oil. Two figures sat in front, both still in tactical gear. Neither spoke to her. The windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see outside. All she could do was sit in the back seat, hands shaking, trying to understand what was happening. They drove for maybe 15 minutes. Impossible to tell direction or destination, before pulling into what looked like a warehouse facility. The SUV rolled through several security checkpoints, each guarded by armed personnel in unmarked uniforms. Finally, they stopped inside a large garage bay. The door opened. Out! Lena climbed out on shaking legs to find herself in what looked like a military operations center, banks of computers, tactical displays. Personnel moving with purpose, but everything was wrong. No identifying markers, no flags, no unit patches. Everyone wore the same unmarked black tactical gear. Private Gray. The voice came from behind her. She turned to see a man in his 50s, gray-haired, with sharp blue eyes and the bearing of career military. He wore standard Army fatigues, but with no rank insignia, no name tape, nothing to identify him. I'm told you just use a code word that hasn't been activated in 15 years. Would you care to explain how you know it? Lena's mouth was dry. I don't know. I just remembered it. Someone told me to say it if I was ever in danger. Someone? Who specifically? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I was just a kid. The man studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. Finally, he gestured to one of the personnel. Bring me her complete file. Everything. And I mean everything, including sealed records. Sir, the sealed records require. I don't care what they require. Do it. Now. The man turned back to Lena. Sit down, Private. We need to talk about your childhood. Specifically, we need to talk about what happened to you between the ages of 8 and 11, the years that somehow vanished from your official record. Lena's legs gave out, and she sank into a nearby chair. I don't understand. My records aren't sealed. I was in foster care. There's nothing unusual about. Your foster care records show a 3-year gap where you simply don't exist. No placements. No schools. No medical records. Nothing. Then at age 11, you reappear in the system with no memory of those missing years and a psychological evaluation that's been classified above my clearance level. That's not possible. I remember my childhood. I remember the foster homes, the social workers. Do you? Do you really? Or do you remember what you've been told happened? The question hit Lena like a physical blow, because now that he mentioned it, those years were fuzzy. She had memories, or thought she did, but they were vague, generic, nothing specific, nothing she could point to and say, yes, this definitely happened. A younger officer approached with a tablet, his face pale. Sir, you need to see this. The gray-haired man took the tablet, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up at Lena again, there was something new in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. Private Gray, I need you to tell me everything you remember about the man who taught you that code word. His appearance, his voice, where you were, everything. And I need you to tell me right now, because what you just activated is a protocol designed for a scenario we hope would never happen. What scenario? Lena's voice was barely a whisper. The scenario where someone from Project Nightfall, a classified program that was supposed to have been completely terminated in 2010, suddenly remembers they exist. The room around them seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the facility, an alarm began to sound, steady, rhythmic, urgent. The officer with the tablet looked up, his face even paler than before. Sir, we have confirmation. The attack on the ammunition facility wasn't an attack. It was a test. Someone was looking for exactly this, a Nightfall trigger, and now they know we have one. The gray-haired man's jaw tightened. He looked at Lena with something that might have been pity, might have been respect, might have been both. Welcome to your real life, Private Gray. Everything you thought you knew about yourself, you're about to learn it was a lie. And the truth is going to be much, much worse. In a barracks 3 miles away, Rodriguez, Chun, and Jensen were being debriefed by personnel who kept assuring them that everything would be explained, that they hadn't done anything wrong, that they just needed to answer some questions. None of them believed it. And none of them had any idea that their weakest teammate, the recruit they'd all written off as a guaranteed washout, had just become the most important person on Fort Bragg. Outside, in the October darkness, other eyes were watching. Figures with their own tactical gear, their own plans, their own reasons for wanting to find someone from Project Nightfall. The attack on the ammunition facility had served its purpose. Force the base into crisis mode, make people afraid, and see who reached for protocols that weren't supposed to exist anymore. Now they knew. Now they had a target. And they were very, very patient. The interrogation room, because that's what it was, despite their careful use of the word debriefing, smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaning solution. Lena had been sitting in the uncomfortable metal chair for 3 hours, answering questions from the gray-haired man who'd finally introduced himself as Colonel Marcus Reeves. Beside him sat a woman in her 40s with severe features and eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression on Lena's face. She'd been introduced only as Dr. Samuels. Let's go through it again, Reeves said, his voice patient but firm. The earliest memory you have. Don't overthink it. Just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Lena rubbed her temples, exhaustion making her thoughts sluggish. I'm 6 years old. Social services is taking me away from my mother. I remember her screaming, being pulled away in handcuffs. I remember being scared. And then foster home in Tacoma. The Johnsons, they were okay. I stayed there for about a year before. She trailed off, her forehead creasing, before something happened. I don't remember what. Then I was moved. To where? I don't know. There's a gap, like you said. And then I'm at the Hendersons' place when I'm 11, and I remember Mrs. Henderson telling me I'd had a rough time, but I was safe now. Dr. Samuels leaned forward. When you access a memory of the code word, Nightfall Protocol, what triggered it? What was happening in your mind? We were trapped. Those men were going to hurt us, maybe kill us. I was terrified, and my brain just reached for something, anything. And there it was, like a file I didn't know I had. And the memory itself, the room, the man, can you describe it in more detail? Lena closed her eyes, trying to bring back the image. It was white. Everything was white, walls, floor, ceiling. Very bright. Clinical. Like a hospital, maybe? The man was in his 40s, I think. Dark hair, graying at the temples. He wore glasses. Round frames. He had a kind face, but his eyes were... She struggled for the word. Sad. Like he didn't want to be there. Like he was sorry for something. What else was in the room? A table. 2 chairs. Nothing else. No decorations, no windows. Just empty. Reeves and Samuels exchanged a look that made Lena's stomach drop. What? What does that mean? It means, Reeves said slowly, that you're describing a room that exists, or existed, part of a facility in eastern Montana that was officially decommissioned in 2010. The same facility where Project Nightfall was housed. What was Project Nightfall? Lena demanded, her voice rising with frustration. Everyone keeps mentioning it like I should know, but I don't remember. I don't understand any of this. Dr. Samuels opened a file folder, pulling out a series of photographs. Project Nightfall was a classified program that ran from 2006 to 2010. Its official purpose was to study long-term memory formation and retention in children who'd experienced significant trauma. The unofficial purpose, she slid one of the photographs across the table, was to create a network of civilians' children who could be activated as intelligence assets in the event of a catastrophic security breach. The photograph showed a group of children, maybe 20 of them, all between the ages of 8 and 12. They were standing in front of a white building with no windows, all wearing identical gray clothing. Their faces were blank, expressionless. And there, third from the left in the back row, was a little girl with dark hair and hollow eyes who looked exactly like Lena would have at that age. Lena's hands trembled as she picked up the photo. That's me. That's actually me. Yes, you were enrolled in the program when you were 8 years old, after your mother's incarceration. You spent 2.5 years there. Why don't I remember? Because that was part of the program. Reeves said grimly, when children were released, they underwent a process to suppress the memories, not erase them. True erasure is impossible, but bury them deep enough that they wouldn't surface in normal life. You were given a new placement, a new narrative, and you moved on, or you were supposed to. But the code word stayed, Samuels added, buried with the memories, a trigger that could only surface under extreme stress, in a genuine life-threatening situation. The idea was that if there was ever a catastrophic breach of national security, a major attack on U.S. soil, a complete breakdown of normal communication channels, these children, now adults living normal lives across the country, could be activated. They would remember their training, remember their protocols, and could serve as a distributed intelligence network that couldn't be easily compromised because nobody knew they existed. Lena felt sick. You're telling me my entire childhood was a lie? That I was some kind of sleeper agent? Not quite. Reeves said, you weren't trained for combat or espionage. You were trained to observe, remember, and report. Your mind was conditioned to catalog information with extraordinary detail, to notice patterns that others might miss, to communicate through channels that wouldn't be obvious to an enemy force. And the other children? Lena gestured to the photograph. Where are they? The silence that followed was answer enough. Finally, Samuel spoke, her voice carefully neutral. Project Nightfall was shut down in 2010 after complications. Of the original 23 participants, most were successfully reintegrated into civilian life with no apparent issues. A few have been monitored periodically. How many? Lena pressed. How many are still alive? Reeves' expression darkened. Including you? 7. The others died in accidents that appeared unrelated. Car crashes, house fires, drownings, one apparent suicide. But now, in light of tonight's events, we're reassessing those deaths. You think they were killed? Assassinated? We think someone's been cleaning up loose ends from a program that was supposed to be completely buried. And tonight's attack was designed specifically to flush out anyone who might still have active protocols. Lena's mind was reeling. But why would I enlist? If I was part of this program, if I had this training, wouldn't the military have flagged me? Wouldn't someone have known? Your military application was processed through standard channels, Samuels explained. The sealed portions of your record are encrypted at a level that normal background checks don't access. Only someone specifically looking for Nightfall participants would find the connection. And since the program was classified above most officers' clearance levels, nobody was looking until I said the code word. Exactly. The moment those syllables came out your mouth, every intelligence system connected to the original Nightfall Protocol lit up. Within minutes, we had alerts from DoD, NSA, CIA, and several agencies whose names I can't mention. You became the highest priority person on the eastern seaboard. And the men who attacked tonight? Who are they? Reeves stood up, pacing to the wall where a large monitor displayed what looked like tactical maps. We're still determining that. But the sophistication of the attack, the precision of the timing, the specific targeting of communication infrastructure, this wasn't random. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for. They were looking for me, specifically, not you specifically. They were looking for anyone who might trigger a Nightfall Protocol. You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or, he added grimly, the right place at the right time, depending on your perspective. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young officer entered, his face flushed. Sir, we've identified one of the attackers. Facial recognition from surveillance footage. You're going to want to see this. Reeves took the tablet the officer handed him. His face went pale. Jesus Christ. What? Lena demanded. Who is it? Reeves turned the tablet so she could see. The screen showed a photograph of a man in his 50s with dark hair, graying at the temples, wearing round glasses. The same man from her buried memory. The same man who'd taught her the code word in that white room. His name is Dr. Adrian Chun. Reeves said slowly. He was the lead psychologist for Project Nightfall. He was also officially declared dead 3 years ago. The room seemed to tilt around Lena. He's alive? He's the one attacking us. It appears so, which means everything we thought we knew about the program shut down is wrong. Chun wasn't just following orders. He was running something else. Something within the program that we never discovered. Samuels was already on her phone, speaking in rapid, clipped tones. When she hung up, her expression was grim. I've just been informed that 2 more Nightfall survivors went missing in the last 48 hours. One in Oregon, one in Texas. Both disappeared without a trace. He's collecting them, Lena said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Dr. Chun is collecting the survivors. That's why people have been dying. He's either killing them or taking them. But why? Reeves demanded. The program is dead. It has no operational purpose anymore. What could he possibly want with? He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening. Unless the program never actually ended. Unless Nightfall was always meant to be something more. Samuels pulled up another file on her tablet, scrolling rapidly through encrypted documents. Look at this. The official shutdown of Nightfall in 2010. The authorization came from Assistant Director Mitchell Crane of the NSA. But Crane himself disappeared in 2011, presumed defection to China based on financial irregularities. You think Crane and Chun were working together? Running a rogue operation? I think, Samuel said carefully, that we may have been looking at this backwards. What if Project Nightfall wasn't shut down because of ethical concerns? What if it was shut down because someone discovered it had been compromised from the beginning? The implications hung in the air like poison gas. If Project Nightfall had been compromised, if Chun and others had been running their own agenda within the program, then the children, including Lena, hadn't been trained as emergency intelligence assets for the United States. They'd been trained for something else entirely. We need to move you, Reeves said abruptly. Right now, this facility may be secure, but it's been orchestrated tonight's attack. He knows you're here. He'll try again. Move me where? Classified location. Maximum security. We need time to figure out what Chun is actually planning, and we need you alive to do it. What about the others? The other survivors? We're working on locating them now. But you're our priority, Private Gray. You're the only one who's actively triggered the protocol. You're the only one whose memories might be starting to resurface, which means you might be the only one who can tell us what Chun actually did to you all those years ago. They stood, preparing to move, when every light in facility suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Alarms started wailing. Not the steady tone from earlier, but a rapid, urgent pulse that made Lena's heart race. Breach! Someone shouted from outside the room. We have multiple breaches on the perimeter. Reeves drew his sidearm, grabbing Lena's arm. Stay close to me. Dr. Samuels, you're with us. We're going to the secure transport in Bay 3. They ran through corridors that had transformed from clinical and organized to chaotic and frightening. Personnel in tactical gear rushed past them, shouting coordinates and status updates. The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere above, sharp, close, terrifyingly real. They burst into Bay 3 to find an armored vehicle waiting. Engine running, rear door open. 3 armed guards stood ready, weapons raised. Reeves practically threw Lena into the vehicle. Samuels climbing in behind her. The colonel started to follow when one of the guards suddenly turned and shot him. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Reeves went down, clutching his shoulder, his sidearm clattering across the concrete floor. The other 2 guards turned in shock, only to be shot by their supposed comrade before they could react. The guard who'd fired turned to face Lena and Samuels, pulling off his helmet to reveal a young face she didn't recognize. Dr. Chun sends his regards, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He's been waiting a very long time to see you again, Lena. Waiting to see if the training held. If you were still his perfect creation. I'm not going with you, Lena said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. You don't have a choice. Chun needs you, all 7 of you. The final phase requires. He never finished the sentence. A single gunshot rang out, and the young man collapsed. Behind him, Drill Sergeant Patterson stood in the doorway, his service weapon still raised, his face splattered with blood from wounds Lena hadn't noticed in the chaos. Gray, Patterson said, his voice tight with pain. Remember what I taught you about never giving up? Yes, Drill Sergeant. Good, because this is where you prove you're actually a soldier. He tossed to the fallen guard's weapon. You've got maybe 30 seconds before more of them get here. There's an exit through the maintenance tunnels. Samuels knows the way. Get Colonel Reeves' medical attention, and get the hell off this base. Trust no one except people who knew you before tonight. Your drill instructors, your fellow recruits. They're not part of whatever this is. Everyone else is suspect. What about you? Patterson smiled, blood on his teeth. I'm going to buy you some time. Now move, Private. That's an order. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to help him, but Samuels was already pulling her toward a service door marked Maintenance Access. Behind them, Patterson took up a position by the bay entrance, checking his ammunition with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been in firefights before. The last thing Lena saw before the door closed was Patterson opening fire at figures rushing into the bay, his face set with grim determination. Then she and Samuels were running through dimly lit tunnels that smelled like oil and damp concrete, dragging the wounded Colonel Reeves between them. with the sound of battle echoing behind them and an uncertain future ahead. Somewhere in the darkness, Dr. Adrian Chin watched surveillance feeds and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Project Nightfall hadn't failed. It had just been waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the right trigger. And now, after 15 years of patience, he was finally ready to show the world what he'd really created. The maintenance tunnel beneath Fort Bragg formed a concrete labyrinth that stretched for miles, originally designed during the Cold War as emergency evacuation routes and supply corridors. Now they served as Lena's desperate escape route, lit only by her tactical flashlight and the occasional emergency light that still functioned after decades of neglect. Colonel Reeves was struggling. The bullet had caught him in the upper left shoulder, missing major arteries but causing significant blood loss. Dr. Samuels had torn strips from her shirt to create makeshift bandages, but they were already soaked through. Every few minutes, Reeves would stumble, and Lena would have to catch him before he fell. How much further? Lena asked, her voice echoing off the tunnel walls. 1/4 mile, Samuels replied, consulting a maintenance map on her phone. The GPS was useless underground, but the downloaded schematics still worked. There's an exit that comes up in the civilian housing area. We can commandeer a vehicle there. Then what? Where do we go? Away from here. Away from anyone connected to Nightfall. Your drill sergeant was right. We can't trust anyone in the official channels. Chen has had years to place people in position. They pushed forward, Reeves getting heavier with each step. Lena's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. She'd gone from being a failing basic training recruit to being the target of a sophisticated attack by people connected to a classified program she couldn't even remember being part of. Dr. Samuels. Lena said as they navigated around a collapsed section of tunnel. What did Chen do to us? In the program, what was the actual training? Samuels was quiet for a moment, supporting Reeves from the other side. I've only read the official reports, but the program used a combination of hypnosis, chemical therapy, and intensive psychological conditioning to essentially reprogram how your memory works. They were trying to create perfect recall, the ability to observe a situation and remember every detail with photographic accuracy. Did it work? Too well. The children in the program started developing psychological issues. Intrusive memories, inability to distinguish between important and trivial information, anxiety, dissociation. That's why it was shut down, or why we thought it was shut down. Turns out Chen may have been conducting additional experiments without oversight. What kind of experiments? I don't know. The files are sealed beyond my clearance. But based on what we've seen tonight, she trailed off, unwilling to voice her suspicions. They reached the exit point, a heavy metal door with a manual wheel lock. Lena set Reeves down gently against the wall and started turning the wheel. It resisted at first, rust and age making it difficult, but finally gave way with a screech of protesting metal. The door opened onto a small utility building in the married housing section of Fort Bragg. Through the windows, Lena could see rows of identical houses, American flags on porches, the ordinary domestic life of military families. It seemed impossible that just miles away, the base was under attack. Wait here, Lena said, checking the weapon Patterson had given her. I'll find us transportation. She slipped out into the October night, staying low and moving between shadows. The housing area was quiet. Either the residents had been evacuated or they'd been ordered to shelter in place. She needed to find a vehicle with keys, something they could use to get off base, and the sound of boots on pavement made her freeze. 3 figures in military police uniforms were walking patrol, their movements sharp and alert. Standard procedure during a base emergency. But after everything Patterson had said about trusting no one, Lena couldn't take the chance. She waited until they passed, then moved quickly to a small parking area between buildings. Found an older Ford pickup truck. Civilians were sometimes allowed to keep personal vehicles in married housing. She tried the door. Locked. Checked the next vehicle. Same. The third, a beat-up Chevy sedan that had seen better days, was unlocked. No keys in the ignition, but Lena remembered something from one of her foster homes in Seattle. The oldest Williams boy, Marcus, who'd ended up in juvenile detention, had shown her how to hotwire a car when she was 14. She'd never done it herself, but she'd watched him do it a dozen times. She pulled the panel under the steering column, found the ignition wires, and started working. Her hands were shaking, whether from fear or exhaustion she couldn't tell. Come on, come on. The engine turned over with a cough and a sputter. Way too loud in the quiet night. Lena quickly drove to a utility building, parking so the passenger door was right at the entrance. Helped Samuels load Reeves into the back seat, then climb behind the wheel. The south gate, Reeves said weakly from the back. Civilian traffic only. They might not be watching it as carefully. Lena drove to the housing area, forcing herself to maintain a normal speed despite every instinct screaming to floor it. They passed more patrols, but nobody stopped them. Just another civilian vehicle during confusing night. The south gate came into view, manned by 2 military police officers who looked stressed and overwhelmed. Behind them, Lena could see the fires from the ammunition facilities still burning. Smoke drifting across the base like fog. Stay calm, Samuel said quietly. Act like we belong here. Lena rolled down the window as they approached. One of the MPs stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Ma'am, the base is on lockdown. No civilian traffic. I know, I'm sorry, Lena said, letting her Seattle accent come through a little stronger. My husband is stationed here, Sergeant Davis, and he called and told me to get our daughter to her grandmother's house in Fayetteville. Said it wasn't safe to stay on base tonight. The lie came smoothly, naturally, and that scared her almost as much as everything else. When had she learned to lie so convincingly? The MP looked conflicted, glancing back at his partner. Ma'am, I need to see your dependent ID. Of course. Lena reached into the glove compartment like she was getting her ID, her other hand resting on the weapon in her lap. If this went wrong, she'd have to let them through. Henderson, the other MP called out. We got bigger problems tonight than one scared wife. Just get off base and stay away until you hear otherwise, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. They drove through the gate, and Lena didn't breathe properly until they were a mile down the road, the lights of Fort Bragg disappearing behind them. Only then did she allow herself to shake, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Where are we going? She asked. Fayetteville Hospital. Samuel said, we need to get the colonel stabilized. Then she pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. Then we need to find the other survivors before Chin does. But before she could make any calls, Reeves spoke in the back seat, his voice weak but urgent. Don't use your phone. They'll track it. They'll find us. Sir, you need medical attention. I'll survive. I've had worse. But if you call anyone, if you use any official channels, Chung will know. He's been inside the system for years. He'll have access to everything. Lena glanced in the rearview mirror at his pale face. Then what do we do? We go dark, completely off-grid, cash only, no phones, no credit cards. We find somewhere safe, and we figure out what Chin is really planning. He coughed, wincing with pain. And Lena, we need to try to unlock your memories. All of them. You're the only one who can tell us what he did to you all those years ago. I don't know how to do that. I do, Samuel said quietly. I specialize in recovered memory therapy. It's dangerous, potentially destabilizing, but under controlled conditions, we might be able to access what's buried. They drove in silence for a while, the dark October landscape of North Carolina rolling past. Lena's mind kept returning to that photograph. 23 children in identical gray clothes, all with the same blank expressions. 7 still alive, 16 dead, possibly murdered. And somewhere out there, Dr. Adrian Chun was hunting the survivors for reasons they didn't understand. Tell me about the others, Lena said suddenly. The other 7 survivors. Who are they? Reeves shifted in the back seat, his breathing labored. Michael Torres, 25, software engineer in Austin. Sarah Chun, no relation to Adrian, 24, elementary school teacher in Portland. David Wright, 26, paramedic in Boston. Emma Rodriguez, 23, grad student in Chicago. James Miller, 27, mechanic in rural Montana. And Marcus Williams, 24, chef in New Orleans. Those are only 6. The 7th is you. But what do we have in common? Why those specific children? There has to be a pattern. Samuels pulled out her tablet, which she grabbed during their escape. I've been thinking about that. Look at this. All of you came from seriously disrupted backgrounds. Parents in prison, severe neglect, abuse. You weren't just random foster children. You were specifically selected from cases where... She paused, scrolling through files. Where there were documented concerns about potential early-onset psychological disorders. Depression, anxiety, dissociation. You're saying he chose damaged kids on purpose? I'm saying he chose kids who wouldn't be missed if the experiment went wrong. Who didn't have family checking on them. Who could disappear into the system without anyone asking too many questions. The implications made Lena feel sick. They'd been test subjects. Expendable resources for whatever Chun had been trying to create. They drove until they found a small motel on the outskirts of Fayetteville. The kind of place that accepted cash and didn't ask questions. Samuels went in to get a room, while Lena stayed in the car with Reeves, watching the parking lot for any sign of pursuit. Gray, Reeves said quietly, when we were in that room before the attack, you said you'd been failing at basic training. Yes, sir. But tonight, the way you handled yourself under fire, the way you drove us out of there, the way you lied to that MP, that wasn't a failing recruit. That was someone with training, serious training. I don't understand it either. It's like my body knows things my mind doesn't remember. That's what Chin did. He programmed skills directly into your subconscious, made you capable without you knowing you were capable. The question is, what else can you do that you don't know about? Samuels returned with key to room 117, ground floor, around back. They got Reeves inside and onto one of the beds. Under the harsh fluorescent bathroom light, they cleaned and redressed his wound. The bullet had gone straight through, missing bone, and the bleeding had mostly stopped. He'd need real medical attention eventually, but he'd survive for now. Lena stood at the window, looking out at the empty parking lot. The weapon Patterson had given her resting on the windowsill. Somewhere out there, Chin was hunting. Somewhere, the other survivors were going about their lives, unaware that they were targets. And somewhere deep in her own mind, buried under years of suppression, was the truth about what had been done to her. I'm ready, she said suddenly, turning to face Samuels. Whatever you need to do to unlock my memories. I'm ready. Samuels looked uncertain. Lena, this isn't something we should rush. Recovered memory therapy requires proper setting, adequate support structures. We don't have time for proper setting. Chun attacked tonight because he knew we were close to something. He's not going to wait while we follow proper therapeutic protocols. So if there's information in my head that can help us understand what he's planning, we need to get out. Now. Reeves nodded from his bed. She's right. Do it. Over the next hour, Samuels guided Lena through a series of relaxation and visualization exercises, slowly bypassing the mental blocks that Chun had installed so many years ago. It was painful, not physically but emotionally, as memories started surfacing like debris from a shipwreck. She remembered the White Room now, remembered sitting there day after day while Dr. Chin showed her images, asked her questions, made her repeat codes and protocols until they were burned into her neural pathways. She remembered other children in other rooms, all being trained in similar ways. But she also remembered something else. Something Chun had told her during one of their sessions, when he thought she was in too deep a hypnotic state to retain the information. You're going to help change the world, Lena. All of you are. You're going to be the seeds of a new kind of warfare, distributed, invisible, unstoppable. When the time comes, when I activate the protocol, you'll remember. You'll remember everything. And you'll do exactly what I've trained you to do. What did he train us to do? Lena whispered, still half in the trance state. What's the activation supposed to trigger? More memories surfaced. Training scenarios, simulations, codes and ciphers, dead drops and secure communications, surveillance techniques. Infiltration methods. Things an 8-year-old should never know, should never be taught. And then the final memory. The day they released her from the program, Dr. Chin had injected her with something, a cocktail of drugs designed to suppress everything she'd learned. But before the injection had fully taken effect, he leaned close and whispered, "The protocol is called Nightfall, little one. When you hear those words, when you speak them yourself in genuine danger, you'll remember. You'll remember, and you'll come back to me. Because you're mine, Lena. All of you are mine. And 15 years from now, when the world has forgotten about this program, when everyone thinks Nightfall is dead and buried, that's when we'll begin." Lena's eyes snapped open. She was back in the motel room, sweat-soaked and shaking. Samuels was holding her shoulders, steadying her. Reeves had managed to sit up despite his wound. 15 years, Lena said, her voice hollow. Tonight, he's been waiting for exactly this moment. For enough time to pass that we be adults, that we be positioned in different places across the country, that anyone who remembered the program would have retired or moved on. What's his end game? Reeves demanded. What is Nightfall actually designed to do? I don't know. That part is still blocked. But I know this. When Chin activates all 7 of us, when we're all together and he triggers whatever final protocol he installed, we're not going to be able to resist. We're going to do whatever he programmed us to do, whether we want to or not. The room fell silent as they absorbed this. Finally, Samuel spoke, her voice carefully controlled. Then we need to find the others now, before Chin does. And we need to figure out how to break his conditioning before he activates it. And if we can't, Lena asked, if the conditioning is too deep? Nobody wanted to answer that question, but they all knew what it meant. If they couldn't break Chen's control, if the other survivors were activated and became weapons against their will, then the only option would be to stop them, permanently. Lena looked down at the weapon on the windowsill, understanding with terrible clarity that she might have to use it on people who were just like her, victims, pawns in a game they'd never chosen to play. Get some rest, Reeves said, lying back down with a grimace. We move at first light. Head to Austin first. Michael Torres is closest. If we can warn him, get him somewhere safe, that's one less person Chun can use. But as Lena tried to sleep on the uncomfortable motel bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. That Chun had been planning this for 15 years, had thought of every contingency, every possible way they might resist. And somewhere in the darkness, 7 phones began to ring simultaneously. 7 survivors answered, not knowing why they felt compelled to pick up. And on the other end of each call, Dr. Adrian Chin spoke 2 words that would change everything. Hello, children. It's time to come home. Lena's phone, the one she'd left in her barracks, the one she thought was safely locked away, began to ring in a property room back at Fort Bragg. The soldier monitoring confiscated items heard it, saw the name unknown caller on the display, and made the fateful decision to answer it. Hello? This is Private Gray's phone, but... Thank you for answering. Chen's voice was warm, almost fatherly. Please tell Private Gray that her training has served her well tonight. And tell her I'll see her very soon. She'll know when. She'll remember. They all will. The call ended. The soldier stood there, confused, trying to decide if he should report this, while he deliberated. 700 miles away in Austin, Texas, Michael Torres suddenly stopped what he was doing, his eyes going blank, and began walking toward the bus station with a one-way ticket to Charlotte, North Carolina, already purchased on his phone, without his conscious knowledge. The activation had begun. The seeds Chun had planted 15 years ago were finally bearing fruit. And across the country, 6 people were about to discover that their free will had been an illusion all along. In the motel room, Lena sat up suddenly, her heart racing, knowing without knowing how she knew that something had changed. The game had moved into its next phase, and whether she was ready or not, she was about to remember everything Dr. Adrian Chun had done to her and discover exactly what kind of weapon she'd been transformed into all those years ago in that white room where children's minds were broken and rebuilt for purposes they were never meant to understand. The dawn was still hours away, But the Nightfall Protocol was already rising, and with it, the darkest secrets of a program that should never have existed.